name is Anson Gonzalez. I'm a Trinidadian poet and a supporter of all things Caribbean. I've known Marissa and the work she's doing for quite some time. I totally endorse it.
Pronunciation?
Was no pronunciation, that's his name.
That's his name? Well, I hope I get the pronunciation of his name correct. And Shakespeare or Shakespeare.
Yeah. Nobody in the Caribbean have I ever heard say Shakespeare. Nobody. They said Shakespeare.
They said Shakespeare.
Yes.
Well, I wasn't into Shakespeare, Nello.
You didn't go into Shakespeare, I want that clear. Nobody ever told you about Shakespeare. Nobody.
As they say, no, Nello. But to be honest, they didn't have any impact on me.
No, I understand that.
You understand that?
Yeah.
You see, from the standpoint that what happened was, well, I couldn't relate much to it because the symbols and the rhythms was out and the tongue twisting and all of that. And
for you, part of poetry, or poetry was part of the awakening of the Caribbean people. And that's what you all were making a contribution. It was not so with me. And you all had turned to the native speech. And it is a rejection of the English domination.
Welcome to another edition of Ambassador 5, a program where we highlight 5 questions with a cultural ambassador who's actively promoting Caribbean culture throughout the world. My name is Marissa, and today we have the pleasure of speaking to Anson Gonzalez, Poet Laureate and a definite pioneer in the Caribbean poetry movement. Welcome, Anson. So, Uncle Anson, tell us a little bit about how you got started in poetry.
I have been associated with poetry from childhood because of the schools that I attended. They all did poetry, they always teach the children in it from a poetic point of view, nursery rhymes and song games and so on. So that I saw myself, I can remember myself taking part in these activities, and more so when I was in the first primer, as they called it in those days, kindergarten. So I remember taking part in the annual school concert, which was a big part of school's activity at that time. Mm-hmm. And I had to say a little couple with some lines. Like where I'm living now, this window that's there is about 30 feet up, and then there are some trees across the road which are hiding that. Mm-hmm. Reminds me that the lines I had to say was treetops in the skies are found, and their roots are in the ground.
And after learning to read on J.O. Cartridge's West Indian readers, I became quite a voracious reader, especially of things above my expected ability. I was not quite discriminative about the origin of the books, but I do remember my father warning me not to read a certain book about folklore and superstitions by one of the Arima authors of the time.
And I know the last time we spoke, you mentioned that growing up in Trinidad was almost like Shakespeare, The Tempest, his play The Tempest, because there was so much life and, poetry and music.
It was always full of noises, pleasant songs.
Right.
So that's true if I did say so. The Prospero image comes back with us right down up to now. So we did that. There were a few people writing poems. Way back in 19.
So given that long and extensive background with poetry and the literary arts, when you look back, what do you think is your biggest achievement?
Well, I was always associated with the teaching profession. So teaching others and learning, sharing what I taught was part of it. All during colonial times, to be able to do the British poetry It was very much de rigueur, as you might say. Speak well, you know, but enunciate.
Right, right.
If you had a little touch of Oxford and you thought you were great. But with the dawning of the independence period and the practice sprung up. There were more people trying to express themselves. I myself really became active during the late 60s. And before that I was in drama with company of players and Freddie Kisson showing players and other groups. But by the early 70s I was more into the literary arts.
Right.
I think there was a literary arts at the time. Because I was scripting poetry. I was also doing literature, and the tutor in that course encouraged us not only to be consumers of the culture and consumers of poetry, but to be creators and producers as well. I took that as a little starting point, I think. Not very consciously, but somehow that I should try to write some poetry. Not that I had written some lines before, you know, when they came to my head. Like I was working in the country and I had to travel 10 or 12 miles a day to the school through forests and rainforests and all. So that sometimes words would come, but they were not like controlled. I didn't know what I was doing. More like filling everybody else's song with my words. Yes. So it's in the 70s with the rise of the Black Power movement and the disenfranchised or disenchanted youth expressing themselves in quite creative ways. One of the ways was also in poetry of the type that started to spring out in I call popular poetry. So all of us who were involved started to do that. And those of us who studied literature tried to put what we had learned at the university into practice. In the meantime, alongside all of those things, the School of Continuing Studies now, it used to be the exchange studies unit then, used to have regular annual culture workshops, drama, dance, a whole big college of arts for the summer, for 6 weeks in the summer. And I remember taking one of them in creative writing. We'd exposed to Derek Walcott and Eric Roach. And that also, what I'd say, kept my interest and made me try to achieve at a certain standard.
Right. And you touched on something really important just now in terms of, our journey into independence and us shaping the words that we express about ourselves. So, from your perspective, what is the role of poetry in the Caribbean cultural landscape, either back then or even now?
We started to respect the local dialects, the Caribbean dialects, some more than others.
Right.
So that while grammar and elocution was important, we also paid attention to the background, depth, folklore, philosophy of the particular place and time. Rather than somebody else's place and time we were imitating. A lot of modern poets around, and there were no outlets for them because there were this proliferation of occasions, like in Woodford Square or wherever the action was in the previous period. So that things evolved as well as the electronic age was coming into being, right? We were involved in I guess, assimilated certain things. And that even gave birth to a whole new Trinidad genre called your friend, Napso.
My vibes.
was still country.
Right.
People like Paul Keats Douglas, who was like a narrative poet, storyteller, the dialect, who did very at all to it promoted the dialect. I'm saying dialect, like I say dialect. So he was one who showed and developed a certain sector for the resistance and other. I don't know what I did, but one of the things I did was to be interested in publishing, and not to be publishing big fancy productions, but more like we would have called them Sammy's that in those days, because they were more like cycle style, were like Xerox sort of approach. Right. Because it was cheap, you could produce a book is thousands of dollars. A small book. That was the way we did it, and I sort of just stayed doing it for a long period. I published first a journal which did many I would let it take pioneering things at the time. When I was the first one doing that, they were journals like Clifford Seeley's Voices. Voices stopped coming. I abruptly seized the title and called it New Voices and appears in my room. Don't tell them everything, oh my gosh. So that New Voices, I ran it for 20 years, publishing hundreds of poets and stories and a few playwrights and articles and critic writers. They were trying to put news about literary events where it was available to those interested. Right. That was a very important thing I did. I only did it twice a year, so that also and keep in touch with the people. I gave all my salvageable effects to the library. Responded to the Anson Gonzalez special collection. And that collection was selected by the Caribbean group as one of the memory of the world collections. In this period, it's for the way in which the material which I did, the way I presented it, showed that I had done something to preserve the history and development of the literature and culture.
And that...
No prize, no money, that's just really good.
Right. But that brings up a good point. So my last question for you is, in terms of your legacy, right? When people hear the name Anson Gonzalez, let's say 20 years from now, what do you want them to remember, to think about you?
I cannot really say. What do you remember Keats for? Shelley and all these guys. Some of them really clever. Like one of my favorite was Marlowe. You remember him because he was a wild man. Robert Burns was a great lover. Many other people from different things. Besides the poetry, but they had a group of poems which people find which just started and could represent the country. Chaucer, that's from way back then. In Trinidad, they had a function which recommended certain people as pioneers since the 60s. Well, I was published first in the 60s, but I wasn't called it. Spent all the years from independence to when I left, 50 years in working by doing some formal dance, drama.